The hum of soft jazz echoed through the small downtown bistro, where the lights above each table glowed like warm lanterns in a sea of quiet conversation. At table 9, a boy no older than 10 sat alone, his dark curls falling into his eyes, as he carefully shaded in the sail of a small boat sketched on his paper placemat. The crayons beside him were worn down, the blue one broken in half. He didn't mind. He was used to making do with less, from a distance. Behind a curtain that separated the kitchen from the main dining floor, a man stood watching, not the chef, not a waiter, but someone with a presence that suggested he was used to being listened to. His name was Julian Graves, a man with wealth that stretched far beyond this single restaurant he quietly owned. To most of the world, he was the untouchable billionaire, featured in magazines and whispered about at charity galas. But here, tonight, none of that mattered. Julian wasn't watching the guests or the service. He was watching the boy, his son. Elias. It had been nearly 2 years since Julian began testing people, not for fun, but out of quiet desperation. He had everything money could buy, yet had failed to find anyone who treated his son as more than a shortcut to his fortune. Babysitters had come and gone, some fawning over him with forced charm, others ignoring him entirely. Dating was worse. Every woman he'd met seemed more interested in the empire than the man, and certainly not in the quiet, thoughtful boy who sketched boats instead of playing video games. So he created his own test, a blind date, not with him, but with Elias. Every so often, through friends and referrals, he would arrange a meeting, discreetly, for a woman to accidentally be paired with his son before ever seeing Julian. No setup, no clues, no instructions. Just a simple moment to see what she would do when seated across from a child she hadn't expected. Most failed within minutes. Tonight, he had little hope for anything different. But he came anyway, not as a rich man searching for love, but as a father, hoping someone might finally see his son before his status. Just then, the front door opened. The hostess glanced toward Julian for silent confirmation before smiling and welcoming the new guest. Maya Ellis stood awkwardly at the entrance, her worn heels clicking softly on the tiled floor. She smoothed her thrifted navy blouse and offered a small, nervous smile to the hostess. Her eyes scanned the restaurant, warm, elegant, far nicer than anything she'd ever been invited to. She clutched the strap of her second-hand purse a little tighter. "Reservation for Maya Ellis," she said quietly, her voice steady, though her stomach fluttered with nerves. "Blind date," the hostess confirmed gently, her tone light. Maya nodded. "That's what they told me." The hostess smiled, as if this was all perfectly normal. "Right this way." As Maya followed her through the room, she couldn't help but feel out of place. The other women here wore sleek dresses and diamond earrings. She'd brushed her hair 3 times before leaving the house, hoping that would be enough. She'd never been on a blind date. She only agreed because her neighbor had begged her to go, something about helping her friends. Community outreach event, and that it might be good for Maya to put herself out there. She hadn't expected much, maybe coffee, small talk, but she definitely hadn't expected this restaurant or the sight that greeted her at the table. A boy, alone, sketching quietly on a paper placemat. Maya stopped in her tracks. She said gently to the hostess, "I think there's a mistake. I was told I'd be meeting someone." "You are," the hostess replied with a knowing smile. "He's with Mr. Graves. Your date will join you shortly." Maya's eyes flicked back to the boy. He didn't look up, just kept sketching. For a long, strange second, she considered walking out. This had to be a prank or a mix-up. Who sends someone on a date with a child? But then she noticed something else. The boy's plate was empty. No drink, no bread, just crayons and a half-finished sailboat. He looked lonely, not in the way kids sometimes get bored and fidget, but the kind of lonely that seeps into your bones. Maya recognized it. She'd worn that look before, as a child left to wait at after-school programs, long after all the other parents had come and gone. Her hand hesitated, then slowly reached for the back of the chair across from him. She sat down. The boy still didn't look up. "Hi," she said softly. No answer. She reached for the breadbasket just delivered to the table. There were 3 pieces left. One was a crusty heel, the kind most people left behind. Without thinking, Maya took it out, broke it in half, and held one piece toward him. "You look hungrier than me." The boy paused. Slowly. He glanced up at her, not with the blank look of a child forced into politeness, but with surprise, as if no one had ever offered him something without expecting something in return. He took the bread gently, nodded, then returned to his drawing. Maya smiled and took a small bite of her own. Peace. No agenda, no pressure, just kindness, without explanation. Behind the curtain, Julian exhaled. He hadn't expected this. Not tonight. Not from her. But he watched as the minutes passed, and Maya made no move to pull out her phone, no attempt to ask where her real date was. Instead, she simply sat there, occasionally offering a comment about the drawing, asking his son what he liked to eat. She didn't treat him like a puzzle or a nuisance. She treated him like a person. A small waiter approached to take the order. Maya glanced at the boy. "Do you like pasta?" she asked. He nodded, almost imperceptibly. "We'll share, then," she said, smiling up at the waiter. "Pasta with red sauce, please." To plates. Julian couldn't remember the last time someone had offered to share anything with Elias. Most asked what he liked and ignored the answer, or ordered for themselves and offered him bites. This was different. The food arrived. They ate. Elias said little. Maya didn't push. Instead, she talked softly about the mural she was helping paint at the community center, about her younger sister who thought she could be a dancer, about the neighborhood cat that always stole their laundry clips, and then something even more unexpected happened. Elias laughed. Just once, but it was real, soft and quick, like the wind lifting a leaf before anyone noticed. Julian froze. It had been months since he'd heard that sound. He wasn't ready to walk in yet. He didn't want to break the moment. Instead, he stepped back from the curtain and made a quiet note in his phone. Her name, the time, the reaction. He didn't know if Maya would want to see him after this. He didn't even know if she'd be angry that the date had been a test. But for the first time in years, he had hoped. Maya reached for her napkin, dabbing the corner of her mouth, then leaned forward just slightly. "I don't know if your dad is running late," she said to Elias, "but I'm glad I got to eat with you." The boy looked up again. His drawing now showed the sailboat on water, with a second sailboat beside it. "You didn't ask who I am," he said quietly. Maya smiled. "Do I need to?" Elias didn't answer, but something in his eyes shifted. The way someone's heart softens when they realize they've been seen, not for what they represent, but for who they are. And for Julian, standing in the shadows with the weight of wealth and loneliness on his back, that moment said everything. He wasn't the richest man in the room. She was. The air outside had turned cooler by the time Maya stepped out of the restaurant. A soft breeze lifted a strand of her hair as she paused on the sidewalk. Unsure whether to smile or cry, she glanced up at the night sky, where a handful of stars had begun to peek through the city's glow. The evening had not gone the way she expected, and yet she couldn't stop thinking about the boy, Elias. He had barely spoken, and still, something about his quiet presence, his thoughtful drawing, the way he accepted her broken piece of bread as if it were gold, it lingered with her. It stirred something old and forgotten inside her, a feeling she hadn't let herself feel in a long time. It had been years since anyone looked at her without expectation. She started walking, the restaurant now a memory behind her, her mind returning to her real life, the one waiting in a one-bedroom apartment with creaky windows and walls too thin to hide her sister's late-night dance rehearsals. She pushed the key into her apartment door and slipped inside. "You're late," called a voice from the kitchen, cheerful and teasing. A teenage girl twirled once in the narrow hallway, holding a wooden spoon like a microphone. Her long braids swung behind her as she posed dramatically. "So, did your mystery man propose yet?" Maya dropped her purse on the small couch and laughed, though it came out more tired than amused. "It wasn't like that, Lena." Lena gasped. "Wait, was it awful? Oh no, did he have weird teeth?" Maya shook her head. "He didn't show up, just someone else did." Lena arched an eyebrow, leaning on the counter. "Wait, what do you mean? Like, you were stood up?" Maya thought about it. about the hostess's strange smile, about the way the waiter never seemed surprised, about the quiet boy with the tired eyes. I don't think I was stood up, she said slowly. I think it was a different kind of date. Lena blinked. Maya, you're not making sense. Maya shrugged, smiling faintly as she kicked off her shoes. Neither did tonight. She didn't explain more, not yet. It didn't feel real enough to put into words. Across town, in a glass-walled office above the restaurant, Julian Graves sat behind his desk with Elias curled on the couch beside him. Sketchbook still in hand, the boy was unusually quiet, even. For him, Julian glanced over, waiting, letting the silence breathe. Finally, Elias spoke. She didn't leave. Julian nodded, his eyes softening. She didn't even check her phone, Elias added. Julian leaned back in his chair. No, she didn't. The boy looked down at his sketchbook, flipping past boats and buildings until he stopped at a blank page. He stared at it for a long moment, then picked up his pencil and began to draw something new. Can she come again? Elias asked without looking up. Julian hesitated. He had rules for these tests, clear ones. Never follow up, never reach out. If someone passed, they passed. It didn't mean they'd be interested in what came next. It was safer that way. For Elias, for him, for everyone. But tonight, those rules felt different. I don't know. He said honestly, I hope so. The next morning, Maya returned to the community art center where she worked part-time, painting murals, organizing after-school art programs, and stretching every donated dollar like magic. The place smelled of clay and old crayons and hope. As she unlocked the supply closet, her supervisor, Carmen, peeked around the corner. Maya, she said, you've got a visitor. Maya frowned. Now, man in a suit. Carmen added with a curious smirk. He's waiting by the front door. Looks like he stepped out of a magazine. Maya wiped her hands on her paint-streaked jeans and headed to the front. There he was. Not the boy, the man. He looked just like Elias. Same eyes, same posture, same quiet calm. Hi, he said, voice low, a little unsure. I'm Julian, Elias's father. Maya blinked, her heart skipping. You wait, what? Julian smiled softly. I owe you an explanation, if you'll let me. She folded her arms. I'd say that's fair. They sat outside on the community bench, surrounded by sidewalk chalk drawings and flower pots painted by first graders. Julian told her everything, the tests, the heartbreak, the way people treated Elias like a stepping stone, the truth about who he was and who he wasn't trying to be anymore. Maya listened without interrupting, her expression unreadable. When he finished, she was quiet for a while. Then she said the last thing he expected. I don't want your money. Julian looked up. I didn't offer it. She smiled faintly. Most people would have by now. That's why I didn't. He said, and maybe why I'm here. Another silence passed, but it wasn't uncomfortable. Finally, Julian stood. I just wanted to thank you for being kind to my son when you had every reason to walk away. Maya looked at him, really looked at him, and saw something beyond the polished clothes and calm voice. She saw a man trying to be more than his past. She nodded slowly. He's a good kid. He is. I'd share bread with him again, she said. Julian smiled. I hope you will. They didn't exchange numbers. There were no promises. But something had been set in motion, quietly, without fanfare, the kind of beginning that doesn't shout, but whispers, the kind that plants roots before anyone notices. And in the days that followed, Maya found herself thinking of Elias, of Julian, of that strange night where nothing made sense, and everything did. Until, 1 week later, the community center received an anonymous donation, enough to fund the art program for a full year. Maya found the envelope taped to the front door. Inside, a note, just 2 words, for the boat. She smiled. And far away, a boy drew to sailboats again, side by side, riding a wave towards something beautiful neither of them could quite name. The sound of Maya's laughter echoed in the narrow hallway as Lena spun in slow circles on her toes, balancing a mixing bowl like a ballerina in a baking apron. The apartment smelled of cinnamon and something slightly burnt. It was late, and the city hummed in the background like a lullaby. The kind of night where dreams felt a little closer. But Maya wasn't quite in the room. Not fully. She stared at the note again, the one she'd tucked into her coat pocket like a secret. Just 2 words. For the boat. Neat handwriting. No name, no explanation. But she knew. She didn't need proof. Her heart had already decided that she had told no one about the sketch. No one about the small boy who'd drawn it. But someone had remembered. Someone had cared enough to listen when she thought no one had been watching. Maya, Lena's voice, snapped her out of her thoughts. You've stirred that air for 5 minutes. Maya blinked and realized she hadn't added the flour to the batter. She laughed, shaking her head. You've been off since that date, Lena said, peering at her with narrowed eyes. And don't say it was nothing, I know you. Maya tried to brush it off. It's complicated. Complicated is code for interesting, Lena teased, scooping batter into cupcake tins. Is he married? Secret agent. Did he turn into a cat? His son came on the date. Maya said before she could stop herself. Lena froze, one eyebrow raised. Wait. What? Maya hesitated. Then slowly, cautiously, she told her everything. The restaurant, Elias, the shared meal, the father showing up later, the truth about who he was. Not just a father, but the Julian Graves. By the time she finished, Lena was staring with wide eyes and an open mouth. You had dinner with his kid, she whispered, eyes gleaming, like Julian Graves, the billionaire guy with the clean drinking water initiative, that Julian Graves. Maya nodded slowly. Lena put down the spoon, stunned. Why are you not freaking out more? Because I don't care about his money, Maya said. I care about Elias, and maybe. She paused, the rest of the sentence hanging like a delicate ornament between them. Maybe you care about him too, Lena asked gently. Maya didn't answer. She didn't need to. Her silence said everything. That night, she lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the hum of the fridge and the creak of the old radiator the only sounds. She wasn't someone who daydreamed anymore. Life had made sure of that. But somehow, that night had gotten under her skin. Like a pebble in a shoe, not painful, just persistent. Always there, always reminding her, across the city, in a penthouse. That felt more like a museum than a home. Julian watched Elias sleep. The boy's sketchbook lay on the bed beside him, open to a new drawing, to boats again, this time with sails that glowed as if catching golden light. Julian didn't understand how someone they barely knew could have made such an impact. But Elias was different now, more open. He asked about things again, music, paint. He hummed while brushing his teeth. That had stopped after his mother passed. And now he hummed again. The next day, Elias asked a question he hadn't asked in years. Can I see her? Again, Julian paused. You really liked her, huh? Elias nodded, then looked away. She made the silence not feel empty. Julian felt something pull in his chest, like a door creaking open, that he hadn't touched in years. He didn't want to interfere. He didn't want to turn kindness into a transaction. But he also didn't want to let something good slip away just because it didn't fit the plan. Later that week, Maya was cleaning up after an art session with 3rd graders, when Carmen walked in holding a folded piece of paper. You've got another one, she said, handing it over like it was contraband. Maya raised an eyebrow and unfolded the note. It read, Saturday, noon, same table. Just as this time, if you'd like. JNO phone number, no pressure, just an invitation. She stared at the paper, her fingers trembling slightly. And though part of her wanted to say no, to stay safe, to keep her world small and manageable, the bigger part of her, the one that had shared bread with a boy, whispered yes. Saturday came. She wore the same blouse, not out of necessity this time, but intention. When she walked into the restaurant, she expected a host. Instead, Julian was waiting by the door, hands in his coat pockets, eyes soft and unsure, like someone meeting a stranger they already missed. You came, he said. She nodded. You asked. They sat at the same table. No sketches this time, no tests, just 2 people, facing each other with no distractions between them. I didn't plan any of this, he said gently. The tests, they were my way of protecting Elias, and myself, I guess. I understand, Maya replied. You weren't wrong to protect him, Julian looked down, then back up. But it wasn't fair to you. Or to the possibility of her this. Maya tilted her head. Of what? He hesitated, then smiled, the kind that didn't try to charm, only tell the truth. Of something real. Maya looked at him for a long moment. She thought about her life, all the years of working late, of saying no to anything that wasn't practical. She thought about the weight of survival, and the ache of loneliness she had learned to live with like an old bruise. Then she thought about Elias. About the bread basket, about the sailboat, and she realized something. Maybe the most beautiful moments in life weren't grand or loud. Maybe they were small, quiet. A boy sharing crayons, a note with 2 words, an invitation that asked for nothing, but offered everything. She reached for her water glass and took a sip, then smiled across the table. Tell me something about you that no one else knows, she said. Julian blinked, caught off guard. Like what? Something real. He chuckled under his breath. I once learned to juggle fruit in a hotel kitchen to make Elias laugh. She laughed, light and warm. That counts. They talked until the lunch crowd thinned, until their empty plates were cleared and neither noticed, until Elias ran through the restaurant's back hallway just to peek in, not to interrupt, just to see if she was still there. She was. When Julian walked her out, the city felt warmer. Somehow, I don't want to rush anything, he said. But if this is something, I'd like to keep seeing where it goes. Maya looked at him, heart steady. So would I. They stood for a moment, not moving, not needing to, just breathing. The same air, letting something new settle between them. It wasn't love, not yet. But it was a beginning. And sometimes, beginnings are the most powerful stories of all. It was raining. Not the kind of rain that chases people indoors, but the slow, thoughtful kind, where every drop seems to land with purpose. Maya stood just outside the community center, umbrella forgotten at her side, watching the drops trace down the glass of the front door. Inside, children's laughter echoed through the hallway. The art room smelled of glue and markers and innocence. But her thoughts weren't here. They were across town. At table 9. With a boy who sketched in silence, and a man who asked for nothing but honesty. She hadn't meant for this to happen. When she'd agreed to that blind date weeks ago, it had felt like a borrowed moment, a chance to pretend, for just one evening, that life wasn't a constant climb. But now, it wasn't pretend anymore. Maya sighed and stepped back inside. The warmth of the center wrapped around her like a familiar blanket. She'd always believed that art healed people, gave them voice where words fell short. And yet, somehow, she felt herself becoming the canvas, unfinished, unsure, and wide open to change. Maya, Carmen appeared beside her, holding a stack of flyers. Maya blinked. Yeah, you've got a visitor again. This time, her heart skipped. Not because of surprise, but expectation. She turned and found Elias standing in the doorway, drenched from the rain but smiling, holding something behind his back. What are you doing here? She asked, stepping forward, worried. Where's your dad? He's parked around the corner. He said I could come in first. Maya knelt slightly. You're soaked. I wanted to give you something. He pulled a slightly damp folder from behind his back and held it out. Maya took it carefully and opened it. Inside was a new drawing, this one different from the others. A big canvas filled with color. It showed a sailboat again, but not alone. There was a figure on the dock, reaching out. The sailboat wasn't drifting away anymore. It was anchored. At the bottom of the page, written in blocky, careful letters, were the words, "Home is where someone waits for you." Maya stared at it, breath caught in her chest. I like coming here, Elias said. It's not quite like our house, but it feels safe. Maya blinked back, the sting in her eyes. It's your safe place now too. Julian appeared in the doorway moments later, umbrella in hand, his eyes immediately finding them. He looked tired, not in the exhausted sense, but the way people look when they've been carrying something heavy for a long time. They drove Maya home that evening. Not because they had to, but because it felt natural now, like a rhythm they hadn't realized they'd fallen into. Lena opened the door in a face mask and slippers, then stared in wide-eyed shock as the billionaire stepped into their tiny apartment holding a bag of takeout. Julian smiled. I brought dinner. Lena blinked. "This is the best Tuesday of my life." They ate on the floor because the couch wasn't big enough. Elias showed Lena his drawings. Julian asked about Maya's mural project like it was the most important thing in the world. And for one night, there were no headlines, no tests, no distance, just people, real and imperfect and together. Later, after Elias had fallen asleep on the couch and Lena had retreated to her room, whispering something about needing to process this in a journal, Maya and Julian stood near the window watching the rain start again. He looked at her with that quiet kind of intensity, the kind that doesn't beg, but invites. "I haven't done this in a long time," he said softly. "Shared takeout with strangers." He chuckled. "No, trusted someone, let them in. Not just to my life, but to Elias's." Maya turned to face him fully. "He's not a test to me, Julian. I know," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "That's why this scares me." Maya reached out without thinking and took his hand. "I'm scared too," she admitted, "but that's okay. Some of the best things in life start scared." Outside, the rain thickened, painting streaks down the window. Inside, two people stood in the glow of soft lamplight, letting their walls crumble in the quietest way. But life doesn't pause for perfect moments. The next morning, reality returned, not with cruelty, but with clarity. At the community center, Maya found Carmen waiting with a clipboard and a strange look in her eyes. "You've got another visitor," she said. Maya smiled, expecting Elias, but it wasn't Elias. It was a woman in a tailored suit, holding a phone and a silver folder. "Miss Ellis," she said briskly. "My name is Marla Kent. I'm Mr. Graves' attorney." The word hit like a cold wind. "Attorney?" Maya asked, caught off guard. "I'm here on behalf of the Graves estate," Marla continued, flipping open the folder. "There are matters we need to discuss, confidential ones." Maya felt her stomach knot. "Is Julian okay?" Marla paused. "He's fine. This is about you." The next 5 minutes passed in a blur of legal terms, estate interests, and a confusing offer. Julian, it turned out, had made a decision, one meant to protect Maya and Elias from the scrutiny that had plagued his life for years, a trust, a grant, her name listed as an official partner in the community project, to give it legitimacy. Safety. It was generous. To generous. It made her feel like an employee, or worse, a recipient. Later that evening, when she saw Julian again, she didn't smile the same way. He knew before she spoke. "You found out." Maya folded her arms. "You didn't think I should. I wanted to tell you in person," he said quickly. "I just didn't want you to feel like I was buying anything, but that's exactly how it feels," she replied, voice quieter than before, like I passed some other test. Julian's face fell. "No, Maya, that's not what this is." "Then what is it?" He stepped closer, but she stepped back. "I care about you," he said. "I care about Elias. I thought this would help." "I didn't want help, Julian," she said, trying not to cry. "I just wanted real." And just like that, the moment cracked. Not broken, not completely, but bruised in the way all meaningful things are when tested by fear and misunderstanding. Julian didn't try to fix it. He only nodded, eyes shining with a vulnerability she hadn't seen before. "I'll wait," he said softly, "until you're ready, not for anything I can give you, just for a place at your table." Maya said nothing, but her heart whispered what her voice couldn't yet. "Please still be there when I come back." Maya didn't sleep that night. She lay in bed long after the city had gone quiet, long after Lena's gentle breathing became the only sound in the apartment. Her mind kept returning to Julian's words, "I'll wait." They'd been so simple, but they carried the kind of weight that stays with a person, not because it was a plea, but because it wasn't. He didn't ask her to come back. He just left the door open. And somehow, that made it harder. She turned over and stared at the ceiling, wondering how something so beautiful could feel so complicated, wondering when the last time was that someone had offered her something, without expecting her to earn it. The truth was, she didn't know how to receive love that wasn't wrapped in struggle. The next morning, she returned to the community center early, trying to distract herself in the chaos of paints and lesson plans. Kids rushed in with sticky fingers and loud laughter, and for a few hours, She let herself be theirs, Maya the art teacher, the smile maker, the safe space. But it wasn't enough to silence the questions in her chest. By lunchtime, Carmen found her in the back room, kneeling beside a cardboard box of donated supplies. "You okay?" she asked, crouching beside her. Maya hesitated, fingers tangled in a roll of tape. "You ever feel like something good showed up in your life too soon?" she asked. Carmen smiled softly. "No such thing. Good things come when we need them, not always when we think we're ready." Maya swallowed. "What if I mess it up?" "You will," Carmen said simply. "We all do. That's part of loving something real." Maya didn't respond. She just nodded. That afternoon, she sat at the edge of the community garden, a quiet place behind the building where kids planted flowers and vegetables in crooked rows. A small red tomato glowed under the sun, untouched, still growing. She remembered Elias's drawing, the sailboats, the word home. She missed him. She missed both of them. But her fear clung tighter than her hope. That night, Lena found her in the kitchen, staring into a cup of tea gone cold. "You're punishing him for something someone else did," Lena said gently. Maya looked up. "All those years," Lena continued, "of people disappointing you, of being let down. You're carrying that around like armor. But Julian's not them, and you know it." Maya said nothing, but the next morning, she took the bus to a part of the city she hadn't visited in years. A quiet residential street with brick buildings and overgrown hedges. She stood in front of the gate for a long time before finally pushing it open. Inside was a modest care home, the kind with wide hallways and soft music playing from unseen speakers. A woman at the front desk looked up. "Can I help you?" "I'm here to see Evelyn Ellis," Maya said, voice small. The woman nodded. "Room 12. Maya's footsteps echoed on the linoleum floor as she walked, her heart pounding. She hadn't seen her mother in nearly 2 years. The last time had ended in shouting, accusations flung like knives, old wounds reopened. Maya had walked out that day with tears on her face and a promise never to return. But today, she came back. Not for answers, for peace. The door to room 12 creaked open. Her mother sat by the window, a blanket draped over her knees, her eyes distant but alert. Maya stepped in slowly. Evelyn turned. For a moment, there was silence. Then, "You look tired." Maya let out a breath. "So do you." A pause, then a small smile tugged at the edge of Evelyn's mouth. "I didn't think you'd come back," she said. "I didn't either," Maya replied honestly. Evelyn nodded, her hands folding in her lap. "I was angry," she said, "back then, at your father, at myself. I didn't know how to hold you without hurting you." Maya blinked fast, willing herself not to cry. "You tried to make me into someone I couldn't be," she said quietly. "I tried to make you into someone who wouldn't break like I did," Evelyn answered. "But I didn't know how to do that with love. I only knew control." They sat in silence after that. But it wasn't cold. It wasn't angry. It was still, like the tide retreating from the shore. Before she left, Maya placed a folded piece of paper on the small table by the bed. A copy of Elias's drawing. Her mother picked it up, studied it, then looked at her. "This is yours?" Maya shook her head. "Someone gave it to me, to remind me what it feels like to be safe." Evelyn's eyes shimmered. "I hope you don't wait too long," she said softly, "to go where you're wanted." Later that night, Maya stood outside Julian's restaurant. She didn't have a reservation. She didn't text ahead. She just walked in. The hostess didn't ask anything. She only smiled and motioned toward the corner table. He was there. So was Elias. And when Maya stepped into their view, the boy lit up, jumping from his seat. "Maya," she smiled, kneeling to hug him. "I missed you," he whispered. "I missed you more." Then she looked up, and Julian stood unsure, hopeful, afraid to hope too much. Maya stepped forward. "I didn't come back for the donation, or the name, or the restaurant." Julian's voice was quiet. "Why did you come back?" She glanced at Elias, then back at him. "Because this feels like a place I don't have to prove I belong." Julian exhaled, and it sounded like something breaking, in the best way. They didn't need to say more. Because sometimes, the words you don't say are the ones that carry the most weight. That night, they didn't talk about the future or the past. They just sat together. A man, a woman, a child. 3 people who had found something rare, not through perfection, but through patience. And outside, the world kept turning. But inside, at table 9, something had finally come full. Circle. The boat had found its shore. 3 months later. The city was alive with the kind of quiet joy that only autumn could bring. Leaves danced on sidewalks, golden and crimson, as the wind played its soft music across crowded streets. Maya stood by the window of her small art studio, now watching as children filed in through the front door, chattering and laughing, their cheeks pink from the cold. The wooden sign above the door read Harbor and Hue, hand-painted in blue with little sailboats at the edges. She still couldn't believe it was real. The space smelled like paint, cinnamon tea, and something she'd never had growing up: security. The lease had come through a month earlier, paid for in part by a quiet investor who refused to let his name be listed anywhere. Maya had insisted on paying half, and Julian, with a crooked smile, had agreed. Today was the first community showcase. Dozens of kids had their art hung up on the walls. From messy finger paint landscapes to carefully sketched portraits, parents milled about with paper cups of cider. Maya moved among them, proud but nervous, the way a new parent might be at their child's recital. From the back of the room, Elias waved. He was wearing a button-up shirt slightly too big for him and holding a clipboard with a sign that read, "Official Art Show Tour Guide." Maya laughed as he approached. "You're late," Elias said seriously. "I'm the founder," she teased. He narrowed his eyes. "Still late." Julian appeared behind him, holding 2 extra chairs under one arm and a lopsided cake box in the other. "Don't worry," he said. "I brought a peace offering." Maya raised an eyebrow. "That cake looks suspiciously store-bought." Julian shrugged. "I'm learning to pick my battles." As they set up in the back corner, Maya took in the sight of her studio, full of people, full of light, full of possibility. Just a few months ago, she was surviving 1 week at a time, afraid to dream bigger than her next rent payment. Now, she was helping others do what she almost didn't believe she could: start again. After the event wound down, after the last goodbye and hug and photo, she sat on the floor with Julian and Elias. The room was quiet, dimly lit, still warm from the day's joy. Julian leaned against a wall, elbows on his knees. "You know," he said, "I used to think giving money away was the biggest difference I could make." Maya looked over at him, and now, he glanced at her, then Elias. "Now I know showing up matters more." She rested her head against the wall, her shoulder touching his. "You did both," she whispered. Elias had fallen asleep, curled up next to her, his head in her lap, one hand clutching a crumpled art show program. Maya smoothed his hair back gently. "Do you think," she asked softly, "he'll remember this? This time in his life?" Julian didn't answer right away. His voice was quieter when he finally did. "I hope he remembers how it felt." Maya smiled, her eyes glistening. "That's the kind of memory that saves people later." Outside, the wind picked up. The sailboat chimes hanging by the window tinkled. Months passed, winter arrived, and in that season, something extraordinary happened. One Friday morning, Elias stood by the counter at the studio, tapping his foot as he waited for Maya to finish writing thank you notes. He was dressed for school, backpack slung over one arm, scarf along around his neck. "Maya," he said with a tone of utmost seriousness. She glanced up. "Yes, Captain." He fidgeted. "Can you come with us to the school's winter concert?" "Of course," she said. "Wouldn't miss it." "No, I mean like, with us, like, with us." Julian looked up from the papers. He was reviewing. Maya paused. Elias bit his lip. "People keep asking if you're my mom." Julian set the papers down slowly. Maya's breath caught. "And?" she asked. "I don't care what you call it," Elias mumbled. "But I just want to say yes next time." Julian's face shifted, softening. His eyes locked on Maya. And for the first time, she didn't flinch from what was being offered. She knelt in front of Elias. "Okay," she said. "Okay." He asked. She nodded. "Yes, you can say yes." Elias threw his arms around her. Julian reached out and gently wrapped his arms around both of them. It wasn't a proposal. It wasn't a wedding. There were no grand declarations, no champagne, no camera flashes. But in that quiet moment, something sacred passed between them, a choice. Not out of duty or desperation, but love, real love, the kind that's built one small act of trust at a time. In the months that followed, they made a life, a messy, beautiful, real life. Sunday breakfasts where Elias burned the toast, long walks through the park, family movie nights with too much popcorn. The studio grew, too. Maya hired her first assistant. A second location opened on the other side of the city. And everywhere, people started to know her name, not as the girl who worked at Carmine's, but as the woman who turned a blind date into a second chance. It was at the second studio's grand opening, nearly a year after that strange first dinner, that Julian stood at the podium and introduced her as his partner, in business, in life, in everything. Maya didn't cry when he said it, but that night, lying in bed with Elias asleep down the hall and Julian's hand wrapped around hers, she whispered into the darkness, "I never thought my life could feel this safe." Julian squeezed her hand, "Neither did I." And outside, the wind whispered through the trees like a promise, because sometimes the most beautiful love stories aren't the loudest. They're the ones you never saw coming. Born not from perfection, but from kindness, from a girl who gave away the best piece of bread to a little boy she didn't know and found a family in return.